The Central Bank of Nigeria has announced plans to introduce a new regulatory policy aimed at sanitizing debit card issuance and ATM operations across Nigerian banks in a bid to address persistent cash access challenges. Now, the announcement was made by CBN Governor Olayemi Cardoso through his special advisor Fatai Karim at the 2026 Committee of Heads of Banks Operations conference on Friday. Now, according to the Apex Bank, the policy will ensure that the number of cards issued by banks correspond with their deployed ATM infrastructure, helping to reduce congestion, downtime, and uneven cash availability nationwide. Nigeria's currency outside the banking system closed 2025 at a record high of 5.4 trillion naira, underscoring a sharp rise in the amount of physical cash held by Nigerians. Now, this is according to money supply data released by the Central Bank of Nigeria, which tracks liquidity conditions across the economy. The surge came alongside a broader expansion in money supply, with total supply at about 124.4 trillion naira, raising questions about the effectiveness of the country's cashless policy ambitions. The Central Bank of Nigeria has upgraded the licenses of selected fintechs and microfinance banks with nationwide operations to national status. Now, this disclosure was made during the just concluded annual conference of the Committee of Heads of Banks Operations in Lagos. The development is aimed at aligning licensing structures with the actual operational footprint of fintechs and MFBs, whose services now span across Nigeria, ensuring proper regulatory oversight. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Arise business analyst Chika Mbonu. Good morning to you, Mr. Chika. It's been quite a while there.
How are you, Abby?
Very well, thank you.
We have three stories that somehow are linked, to each other.
Absolutely.
And I guess you may start with the upgrade of the fintech licenses.
Yeah, we can begin with that.
Yeah, we can go.
Actually, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the reasons behind it.
Okay. The truth is that some of us have actually been worried about the explosion of the fintechs in Nigeria. And on this program, I've said it several times that CBN needs to do a little more regulation of the fintech sector, because they have become a way of life of Nigerians, and we don't want anything untoward to happen to Nigerians' money, because Nigerians are very sensitive to that. See, Abby, if you recall, a lot of these fintechs started their businesses as payment service providers, and then some of them also started as microfinance banks. Operating in a regional basis. What they have seen now is that their operations are totally Nigerian-wide. 36 states of federation. There's nowhere you go to now that you don't hear one of the names, whether it's OPay or Money Point, or as the case may be, the big ones especially. And so they have been operating with a regional, certification on a national scale. So CBN just said something like, guys, you have grown, you can operate now nationally instead of the regional scope that you have been operating. We do recall also that a particular senator talked about the fact that he had challenges with one of the fintech banks, and he didn't see any footprints anywhere in Abuja to go and complain. So what will happen now is that with this new CBN policy, they're going to have footprints in 36 states of the federation. The cards, their businesses now, everywhere you go, every hotel you go, this place you go, people use their services. Meanwhile, the licenses, most of them are actually Lagos-based. And so that's basically that. The issue of regulation, the issue of their business have expanded Nigerian-wide, the issue that the fact they're required to be looked at more. The issue are the fact that the services are more Nigerian-based now. And you find that, therefore, people who are using the services outside their domain, which happens to be most of them Lagos, when they have problems, there's nowhere to go to. So this is basically, you guys have been operating nationally, business-wise, let's legalize it.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, regulation is certainly very key, and especially we don't want an unnecessary open sesame. But in relation to, in comparison rather to the previous tiered licenses, what challenges might fintechs face operating under a national license?
I mean, as I was coming to this program, some people sent some notes to me, and that this is going to whittle down the number or reduce the number of small players. And I say, playing the financial system requires capital. You also know what is happening in the financial system in the last 2 years. Banks' capitals have been upgraded. Lately, you hear that the one about those who play in the stock market, in the capital market, and so it's also important that if you're playing this kind of business, I'm sure that the OPAs, the money points, and so on, or the big ones, they will not be surprised with this policy. I don't think they will be surprised with this policy. It does not, cascade down really to any other the lower ones. If you want to play national, you do national.
Be ready for it.
Be ready for
pretty
it.
much. Okay, yeah. That's a way of putting it. Let's look next at Nigeria's currency outside the banking system, closing at 5.4 trillion naira. Firstly, what does this indicate about Nigeria's payment landscape?
Okay, for our viewers, like people say 5.4 trillion, and so everybody here, Abby, has some of his money or her money inside this. This represents the cash not in the banks. Money not in the banks, and so you and me includes money we keep in our homes. I know some of my friends who have millions of naira of cash in their homes. Money you have in your shops, money you have in your safes, money you have in your drawers. These are the cash there. It's cash circulating hand to hand, not digitally tracked. So it's all there out of the banking system. Now, what could give rise to things like this? By the way, the 5.4 trillion is the highest ever recorded. I mean, Nigeria has actually been, a cash-based society. The Central Bank of Nigeria, we know, has been pushing, through several frontiers to make sure the quantum of cash in the Nigerian financial system is reduced. Yeah. And I hope they are not disappointed with this report, because it's like, we're working very hard and maybe the cash is not reducing. But the truth is, Nigeria is a massive economy, but it is not unheralded. A lot of things may have caused this. See, Abby, especially for the bottom of the pyramid businesses, this is still very, very important. Cash is still very important. Now, as I told you today, there's a congruence between all the three stories that you did during the rundown. When we go to the ATM issues, you will see also the fact that the Central Bank of Nigeria is trying to push a lot of people back to the digital system. The POS channels, the ATM channels. But you see, a lot of times when you go to the ATMs, they tend to not have money than have money. Sometimes what you have, a lot of challenges like debited but not dispensed, and a lot of lack of trust. So what I say actually is that let nobody get worried. The 5.4 trillion is actually a vote on this financial system. We don't trust it so much. We know that we should trust it more, but we still have to hold some cash.
Right.
Incidentally, it happens to be a lot this time.
Yeah.
And so what can be done? Let the systems be a little more reliable. And the ATMs, let them work. The POS machines, let them work. I mean, you go to some of these markets, you want to buy things, and you give them your card, and then, the transaction goes through. They debit you, but the owner of the business does not get any alert. And so what do you do next time? Next time you do what? You carry what? The cash. So you find the vendors actually asking for what? Cash. So the reliability of the system, the failure rate of the system, the ATMs, the POS, and so on and so forth, actually accentuate this movement towards this cash.
It's certainly a daily tug of war, and you've just presented the perfect example for it. But what impact will this have on the effectiveness of monetary policy and CBN's cashless objective overall, on the overall stand?
Abby, you got me. Your points on that. The money outside the banking system, banks cannot lend it. Banks cannot intermediate with it, and then banks cannot support businesses with it because that's in the banking system. CBN policies of when they go to and say, oh, we're reducing the liquidity in the system, may not be effective because of the fact that it does not account for this 5.34 trillion is not included in the CBN basket of monetary policies. So those are the downsides of this cash being outside the system. Banks cannot lend it; they can't intermediate with it, and at the end of the day, the economy suffers for it. Overall for it, and that's principally one of the downsides. And effectiveness, of course, the monetary policies, because CBN is trying to, control the cash in the system to monitor, drive down inflation. But you have the 5.4 trillion that's outside the CBN, control.
So in light of all these facts, as you mentioned, these are all very interwoven events, and they all have a pull-push effect on each other. What integrated strategy would you recommend that the CBN then applies to accelerate financial inclusion?
It ties into the third story that you have here, which is the ATM story, where CBN says they're now introducing new rules linking debit card issuance to the ATM infrastructure that the banks have, so that you don't issue cards everywhere, and then there are no ATM infrastructure to support it. And so such that each time you go to the bank ATMs, as I said, there's some places I travel out of Lagos, especially out of Lagos. If you see the queues at the ATMs, it's very, very, very discouraging. And then you find that there's a limitation on the amount that you can take. And sometimes they debit you, they don't dispense. So this is basically what I call an overload on the existing ATM infrastructure. And so CBN is saying, let's moderate, let's proportionate the card that you're issuing. So if you're issuing this number of cards, you, the bank, must have this infrastructure supporting it. That's basically the new policy that CBN is pushing out, and which is very commendable. So let the banks make the right investment to support the ATM cards they're issuing. In that way, it will restore confidence in the digital payment system. And the issue that I said, you heard about the 5.4 trillion as being outside, people are seeing the transactions still largely with cash will actually reduce. But there's more trust in the system. There's more trust that if you need go to ATM, the money will come, or your POS system will work, and so on and so forth.
I was just going to say, not forgetting ATM operations as well, because that's very key. And, for a layman or somebody who was just not even understanding the dynamics of how this works, what succor is there for them to say, hey, in light of these new rules and all these applications, how do I know for a fact that when I get to the machine, I'm actually going to get that money?
It's interest of the banking system to make sure this doesn't work. I've even seen some banks, ATMs in the bank's branch environment. You go there, there's they're not dispensing. It's always very, very, very sad. And you go to inside the banking hall, you can't get cash. You come to the ATM, you can't get cash. So what do people do? Next time, what are they going to do? They hold the cash.
You also go to a restaurant and try to pay for your meal, and you just eat. This is not an international card.
I remember I was checking out from a hotel one time, and Tech debited me 100,000. No, it didn't go through. And I debit 100,000. It didn't go through. I would have been stranded if I didn't have other distance. So you can imagine if that's this. Or can you imagine being overseas trying to check out from your hotel?
I tell you, that's even worse.
Yeah. You see, for the kind of geographies I will come from, the next thing they will ask me, Mr. Mbonu, do you have another card? They will just think that the card is fake. That's the first thing they think about if the card doesn't go through. So the infrastructure must support the cards that you issue and the overall payment system. And that's what we're talking about.
All right, very, very pertinent points there. If you joined us midway, I've been chatting with Chika Mbonu, a Rise business analyst. As always, Mr. Chika, many thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow. All right, thank you.